It's that time again, everyone. That time. Sarah, go ahead. Tell us your secret shame. It's that time.
It's that time of year again, everyone. We're recording on Saturday, and I have a book due on Monday. So I'm flying by the seat of my pants. But here's what I'll say. It's almost done.
Tommy go boom.
Tommy go boom. Tommy go boom.
Yeah.
Knockout coming in August. You could pre-order it now wherever books are sold. But here's the other thing you can pre-order. Tickets to Fated Mates Live.
Yes.
In New York City. It's a hell of a town.
Yes.
And a hell of a lineup. I think we should announce the lineup.
I think we should too. We haven't done that
Why
yet.
not?
Should we say welcome to Fated Mates first?
You just did it.
Welcome to Fated Mates, everyone. I am Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor.
And I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them. And this week, it's going to be fun. It's going to be just like a rollicking good time. We're going to talk about books that we absolutely love.
Yes.
That you all should absolutely read. But first, Fated Mates Live. We've done this once before. We liked it so much, we decided to do it again, where we bring 200 to 300 of you together in a room for a whole lot of banter with people we love. There might be a moment where we talk about a book that we did not intend to talk about. There will be questions. There will be fun times with the audience members. You'll get to meet lots of other magnificent Firebirds. There will be books for sale, some of Jen's and my favorites. What other thing? Stickers.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a book table. Listen, I hate to be this way, but I'm very excited about the bar.
Great.
This is going to be on Friday night, March 24th in Brooklyn at the William Vale Hotel, starting at 7. Sarah and I will be around.
Eric.
You'll see Eric
lurking in the corner.
Delighted to see you all, but don't approach him. He has a job to do, everybody. He's going to be very important, making sure all the mics work and such.
No, he was somebody asked him to sign something at Fated Mates Live Alexandria, and he was like, what?
That's cute. We'll make sure he has some Sharpies, like, in his pocket or whatever. Okay, so that night, though, along with me and Sarah, we hope being the major draw, our guests will be...
Oh, so exciting.
I want to imagine
maybe there could be a drum roll here.
Sure, Eric can make it a drum roll.
We could probably work that out. I don't know. It's coming out in 3 days, so...
All right, so it's going to be Adriana Herrera and Joanna Shoup, Tessa Bailey,
Andy J. Christopher, and Mila Finelli, our favorite mafia romance novelist.
Yes.
New to Fated Mates Live, new to Fated Mates are Tessa Bailey and Mila Finelli.
Yes. We've had a Tessa Bailey episode probably back in season 2 when it was like our faves, right? The books that blended us.
Because we love Tessa Bailey here at Fated Mates. But now she's like fancy, Jen.
She's famous now.
Now she like tours the world.
I know. Like if you see her on TikTok, she's always somewhere different. But this time she's going to be in Brooklyn.
International. She was in Toronto last week. I was like, Toronto looks fancy.
Oh, Toronto is the best city.
I've never been to Toronto, but I would like to go.
You know how much we love Toronto in my family. We call it clean Chicago. Have you heard this?
No, but I believe it.
Listen, Chicago is not a dirty town. I want to be clear.
No, I've seen that bean. It's very clean.
Toronto is a lovely city. It's beautiful and wonderful and honestly kind of magical. And if I had all the money in the world and Canadian citizenship, I guess, that would be the first place I would move. We love it there. We've always had such a great time.
How far can you like drive over the border to Toronto?
You can drive. So it's long, but like, so for us, it's
a big lake.
Well, you kind of duck under Lake Michigan and then you go over Lake Erie from Chicago. But because my mom lives in Cleveland, the one time we drove there, then we drove back and we went through Buffalo and like past Niagara Falls, which is...
Niagara Falls is amazing.
It is amazing.
If you've never been there, you have to go.
Well, that last time we did that was the year that it was so cold that there were like frozen falls. Have you ever seen this?
And you did it in the winter?
Yeah. And so I actually will see if I can pull up these photos and I'll put them in like show notes. It's wild looking, like basically like these huge boulders of ice at the bottom of the falls. Mm-hmm. And then we like went back under Lake Erie and stopped in Cleveland and saw my mama So,
Oh, right, because Ohio.
yeah, exactly. Lake Erie.
Listen, for people who don't live in that Great Lakes region, there are a lot of them, and they are enormous. And that is what I have to say about the geography of the central
Midwest.
the Midwest.
This is like one of my favorite stories. I don't know if I've ever told this on the pod, which is we had some friends of my husband's who he went to college with. They live in LA. And they came with their kids in the summer. It was a couple like years ago, right? Like Little Romance was probably in middle school at the time. And these kids were around the same age, and like it was the first time the kids had ever seen like lightning bugs, fireflies, I believe you call them like other places. We call them lightning bugs here. And they were like, what is going on with this thing? Right? Which was, It is magical. It's so cool. But then what was really interesting is, so then they took a day and they went up to Milwaukee, and it was like Summerfest, just like a really cool thing that happens in Milwaukee. And then they came back down and we saw them again. And so I said to these kids, I was like, yeah, that was the same lake. And they were like, wait, excuse me? And I was like, so that lake and this one are the same one. And they were like, but excuse me? We were hours north of here.
I will say this. It doesn't feel like they should be called lakes. Like, because when you fly into Chicago,
maybe
from
like
New
an
York City,
oceanlet,
and I don't know what you call it, because I get it. Like, there is science involved here, and there's no salt water, and whatever, fine. But when you fly in from New York and you like are just flying over water and can't see land from the aeroplane,
right?
It feels like there should be a different word for that kind of body of water.
I understand. Anyway,
listen, I am a big fan of the Great Lakes. I've never been to Toronto, but if somebody invited me, I would definitely come. And Tess Bailey's great, and she's going to be at Fated Mates Live, and you can still get tickets. There are a handful of tickets left. This is the announcement of the lineup. This is the official announcement. So we are announcing it today on Twitter, on Instagram. All of the authors will announce it today. So we expect the last few tickets will go pretty quickly now. And if you want to join us, there will be fun prizes, fun people.
Yeah. I'm excited.
I think we should do a prize for the person who comes the furthest.
Okay. All right.
We got to think about what that will be.
All right.
I feel like we could come up with something fun.
Yeah, for sure.
And there will be a prize. This is it. There will be a prize if you come a far distance. And yeah, come meet other Fated Mates listeners. It's going to be a really good time.
Yeah, it will be really fun. I'm really excited about it. I'm just also getting excited about like the rest of my plans for that week. So I'm coming in on Friday and I'm going to spend the whole weekend in Brooklyn. I'm going to spend 2 nights at that hotel because I love myself and I like staying at fancy hotels. And then I'm going to stay at Sarah's probably for a night. And now here's the part, Sarah, where you don't know this, but here we are bantering. Then I have a couple of nights like Monday and Tuesday before my mother comes. And we are going to go up to Connecticut to see Little Romance at college because she's never been to Wesleyan.
It's so nice there.
It is. And so I'm really excited.
Wesleyan shows for grandmas.
Yes, exactly. So I'm very excited about that. And then we'll come back down and spend a couple days. But that Monday and Tuesday.
You're going to be careful. You're not going to break a bone.
I'm going to try to be very careful. Yes, I assume with my mother there, I'm not going to try at any shoes.
I'm probably going to be doing like copy edits or something then. So it'll be harder for me to come running.
Yes.
Is what I'm saying.
Right. Exactly. That's true. Good point. Good point for save the day. Sarah saved the day. I am thinking about spending a night or two down in the Village because I love right?
Ooh, very fun.
Like I was like, oh, I should spend a couple of nights by myself in Manhattan, just like doing something fun. In like a fun neighborhood where you can just like walk out and do whatever you want. And then I was like, oh, so I haven't booked a hotel for that yet. But
I have a good recommendation for a hotel down there. Don't ask me to say it now on the air because I don't have the name of it in my head. But a friend of mine, I don't stay in hotels in Manhattan very often.
Sure. Why would you?
A friend of mine recently stayed in a hotel in Soho. So not exactly the Village, but close.
Close.
And she had a lot of nice things to say about it.
All right. Well, good.
So I'll get that
find that out for me and find out. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think I've mentioned this. The other thing, maybe I'm hoping you can find a way to come with me to this, is I am very excited to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Listen, one of my favorite places.
I don't think I've ever been there. They have a very big exhibit about the Mayans. that closes like that following weekend. And
Let's do it. I'm excited.
See, we're gonna have a good time.
The thing about the Met that I have always had a problem with, and let us know on the internet, everyone, if you too have this problem at the Met, is that I routinely get lost inside the Met and then end up in American Furniture. Which is always a worry. Like, I get to American Furniture and I think, oh no, I've done it again.
Here I am again. All right,
because here's the thing, I have apologies to any American furniturists out there, but like I have no interest in American Furniture, so
weird that you always end up
maybe
there.
That's the thing. Maybe I get. Maybe that's the moment where I realize I'm lost because I'm suddenly like, oh, I
don't. Yeah.
Now I'm not that interested in this Eames chair.
Sometimes it's not that I get lost at the Art Institute, but I for sure there are famous paintings at the Art Institute that it took me years before I actually stumbled across their actual location. So in like one room of the Art Institute, at least when I saw it, because I feel like they move shit around just to fuck with you. The Art Institute, I love you. One was American Gothic, and then also Nighthawks. And I feel like they're kind of in the same area, along with some really great. God, what's that guy's name?
Well, they should be in the same area. Those go together.
Sure. And then like Bronzeville at Night, which is also a famous painting about Chicago, about the South Side. And I was like, oh, these are real things here.
Isn't that bananas when you like turn a corner in a museum and you see like at the Met, there is a giant room of like Degas.
Yeah.
All the ballerinas. And you turn a corner and you're like, holy shit. What? You can just see these? Museums are great.
Thank goodness, because God, if somebody had the idea of a museum now, they'd be like, no, rich people should just own this shit.
I mean, that is kind of what's happening. There's some real capitalist nonsense happening. Do you know? Listen, we're going to talk about this because I was reading this article about investments in a bad economy. Whatever, who cares? And one of this like new things is you can basically like invest in art. And so you invest in like a Warhol painting or a Warhol, like whatever they are. They're not all
an
like,
actual Warhol, not like an
like
NFT?
a real Warhol, right? But like you and I can't afford to buy a Warhol, but we can afford to put, $25 into a fund that then buys a Warhol, holds it in private for 5 years, and then sells it for an increase.
I think capitalism is really broken. Yeah.
Okay. Like I don't want to hold the Warhol in a
if
vault
you would
somewhere. I want you to put that in a museum.
Yes. If you were like, we're gonna buy this shit together so people could see it, I'd be like, I love that idea. But as soon as it was like,
the goal is to then sell it in 5 years. Because art, I guess, appreciates more than anything else in the whole world. Sell it in 5 years to a private collector for more.
That's terrible. I don't like it.
Thanks, everyone. I hate it. Anyway,
me too.
Leaving that aside, you know where we should go?
Where?
The Museum of Sex. It is so fun.
Be right back. Booking tickets right now.
Listen, it's so fun. They have a standing if you're at all, if that intrigued you at all, and you are ever in New York City, there is a museum. It is called the Museum of Sex. It has an incredible collection that is. It's small. You can do it within an hour or two. Of course it's small. It's the Museum of Sex. It's in Manhattan. It's in the 20s.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating about it, so the first time I ever went, Eric and I went, and so there's a standing collection that's like about New York City and sex, which is, New York City and sex go together in a lot of ways, like many cities and sex go together.
Anywhere there are people, really.
Yeah, exactly. There's exhibitions on pornography. They did a giant, like right before the pandemic, they did a big exhibition about like the AIDS epidemic in New York City and how it was,
cool. Okay,
like how things were messaged and the way like underground communities got together and like started talking about these kinds of things. The first time I went, they had an exhibition, a special exhibition that was Victorian, well, I guess Gilded Age. Information about like the Victorian sex and Gilded Age sex. And one of the things that they had was somebody had been renovating a home in New York City and had taken down a wall, like,
Yeah.
to fix something. And inside there were 1,000 postcards, like graphic, pornographic
Oh,
postcards
wow.
from the like late
People.
1800s.
Wow. That's
And
so cool.
they didn't know what to do with them, but the Museum of Sex had just opened. And so they
Yeah.
donated them to
That's
there. And so
awesome.
there was like this huge wall, and it was just like all these like postcards. And it's just such a cool experience, especially for somebody who is, interested in the history of
Yeah.
all of this stuff, to walk into a museum
Yeah.
and have it be treated
Yeah.
with respect.
Right.
Right? It's not for snickering. It's not like, and there's like collections of like sex toys, the history of sex toys.
That's so cool.
I don't know what the standing exhibition it looks like now because I haven't been since before the pandemic. I've been a few times now. And then there are always like special, sometimes there's arts, sometimes, they have everything, lots of different kinds of smaller exhibitions that rotate. So we should go there.
We should. I 100%. It's going to happen. Just have to figure out when.
All right. That's the banter part of the show. This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Carly Lane, author of A Regency Guide to Modern Life.
We are huge fans of Carly's here on Fated Mates. She is a writer for Collider, where she mostly writes about TV, but also writes about romance at Vulture and Paste, and is just a huge fan of the romance genre. Also, famously, the one who coined the phrase we use here all the time on Fated Mates, yikes on bikes.
Terrific. a real gift to me, that phrase.
Yes, and to all of romance.
It's such a good example of why you're going to want this book.
Exactly. So what this is a really charming, like a self-help guide, but she's imagining that the person giving you advice is instead a Regency gossip columnist named Lady A.
Who has like time traveled into modern dating life and is just fascinated by all the weird stuff we do.
Well, fair enough. We're fascinated by all the weird stuff they do. So it is really cute. I think it really leans into like thinking about all of the things that we love about romance, all of the, the Austen, Bridgerton, Darcy, Regency stuff. What should you be dueling or not, right? How do we, how do you make yourself the catch of the season or a diamond of the first water? Lady A is here to help you. So this is just a really charming book that kind of marries together all of our favorite things we love about the Regency, and imagining that the shoe is on the other foot and they're looking at our dating and, our season and giving us some advice about how to do it better.
You can find A Regency Guide to Modern Life in print, in ebook, or in audiobook. And this actually does sound like it would be a really fun audiobook. Anywhere you get your books, or you can find Carly, and we highly recommend following Carly on Twitter and Instagram so you can get more of her hilarious takes on pop culture and her brilliant takes on pop culture. You can find her at Carly Lane on Twitter or on Instagram at Carly Lane Perry. And thanks to Carly Lane for sponsoring the episode.
All right, so
tell everyone what they've won.
All right, so here's our thought. Here's our plan, everybody. I don't remember where this idea came from, Sarah, but I think it was a question. Maybe someone asked us, or we saw it on Twitter or
we
Instagram.
You guys, we have a big notes app that is shared between the three of us, and it has all sorts of things, including all the colors of Cressley Cole heroes and heroines in it.
Sure. They're eye colors, everybody.
Right, I'm all colors.
Because they're all white, pretty much. Let's just get that out of the way.
Yes. In this note, it also has the eye colors of all of the Cressley Cole heroes and heroines.
And anytime someone gives us an idea, right,
we kind of there.
Add it to the list. And so we were looking at the list, and the idea was books you wish you could read again for the first time. And I was
Which is a great idea.
It is a great idea. And I think it really gets at the heart of there's something about the way we read romance. And I think it's, I mean, I don't know. I'm a big rereader, but I think romance in general, romance readers tend to really just connect with characters in a way that is unparalleled, I think, across literature. And so I think what this question is really getting at is what is it like, what is it that when do you make those connections, right?
Right. And I think also it's about, we talk all the time about how romance is really special because it is the genre of like feelings.
Yes.
And I think, but it's also a genre where we are able as readers to give our trust over to a
Yes.
writer and say, I trust you to take me on this journey and make me feel all the feelings. And at the end, it will be okay. So I think when we read romance novels, we are more open in many ways to all of those things, bouncing around inside us. So when we feel these intense feelings as we're reading,
Yes.
there is such joy in that because it is devoid of fear. I don't feel threatened in any way by being open to these books, right? I don't fear being harmed.
Right, because the promise of the HEA means that anything that's happening before the ending, I know there'll be restitution for it, right? So I think that's it too. I think that this question is also really getting at the heart of like, what feeling are you chasing, right? Because what the question's really, I think to me, and it was funny because I was thinking about like, I don't think we prepped this. We're just going to like let it roll, right? But I did think to myself, well, there's two kinds of books, two situations, I guess, under which I have that feeling of like, I wish I could read it again for the first time. And one is when it's a book that I am anticipating, like a matchup, right? Like I know that these characters are coming because they've been teased for several books, right? Like sort of the like, right, like that couple in the background that's been kind of coalescing is about to come. For example, like Tommy and Imogen. I'm just saying, perhaps, maybe. Or, okay, so that's one, right? Like, I'm looking forward to it.
That's a scary
different
one, right? Because you're anticipating it, and then if it doesn't deliver, you're like, that's a bummer. But when it does, you're very happy.
Look, we're not going to talk about those books, but there definitely have books where I've anticipated that and it has not happened. But the other one, I think, is like the unexpected one, where you just start reading a random romance novel for whatever reason, and then you're like, oh shit, I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm
feeling it.
God, that feeling.
Yes.
I mean, that tightening in your chest where you're like, this is giving me all of the feeling. And I know I keep saying like, feeling, but like, oh gosh, you all know what that feels like when you're, it's just that aching chest feeling.
Yeah. Well, and then I think the question is like, then you're like, I'm in slowdown mode, right?
Yeah, you put the book down, but then
I don't want it to come to an end, right? Hey, you know what's amazing? I think I'm in the middle of one of those books right now.
Really? Is it out or are you reading it?
No, not yet. Not yet. But literally, it's the first book I've read this year where I'm like,
wait, are you going to tell us?
Sure, I'm happy to tell you. It doesn't come out until early May. It's is that where we're going to start? We're going to start with this, like me teasing a book that isn't out yet.
I know. I just want you to tell. No, we don't have to talk too much about it, but just tell us.
I do because it's like I'm not surprised because I really like this author. The author's Farrah Heron. She writes books set in Toronto largely. And the name of this book is Jana Goes Wild. Now, part of the reason it's really funny is because everybody who knows me knows that I'm like, why are there animals on the covers of these books? What's going on? I don't want your dogs on the cover of the book. But in this case, Jana is going on a safari in Tanzania with her family. It's where her family is from. They are Canadian Muslims in Toronto, right? Like sort of South Asian, like it's a very eclectically, like kind of diverse group of people in every way. And she's going for the wedding of Kamala and Rohan, who are the hero and heroine of her previous book, right? Kamala Knows Best. But anyway, listen to this setup. The setup of the book is in the prologue, sorry, she is having like in the middle of this like affair with this man. And it is just like this whirlwind 2 weeks where they are just having great sex and great conversations and great, like, they are just like, she's like, I think I've met my soulmate. And she finds out at the end of the prologue that he is married. And the book picks up 5 years later. They are co-parenting. She got pregnant during this 2 weeks. And they're going to this wedding. And
who is
and
he married to?
Okay, everybody listen. It's fine. It's not really, it's fine. He was like trying to serve his ex-wife, trying to serve her divorce papers. He literally couldn't find her, right? But right, so it's not really like he was cheating, but it felt that way to Jana, like rightfully so. And she is pregnant, and he actually moves to Toronto because he's so committed to co-parenting. But basically, for 4 years, like, everything they do is through lawyers and through this app. But he's also friends with the bride and groom, so he shows up at the wedding, and I just don't really think anyone does like one of the things I used to love about old school romance, like the family drama. You know what I mean? And I think Farrah really nails the, like, I want to please my parents, and her mother doesn't really quite approve and is kind of lying to everybody and saying that they used to be married and divorced because she was so embarrassed that her daughter had a baby out of wedlock. I mean, in their culture, like, that's a big deal. And I mean, Jana is just so, like, so prickly and closed off. And I think Anil has, like, literally been in love with her for 5 fucking years and regretting what a total fuck up he is. And I think he wants her back, but it's so beautiful. And I'm just really enjoying this book. And I feel like I'm okay with all these animals on the cover because they're literally on safari. That's it.
Okay, cool.
But I can't even tell you.
All right, everybody pre-order that. It sounds great.
Pre-order it. Oh, God. I mean, listen, if you don't want to wait to pre-order, just go read the backlist, right? And then you'll be ready, because Jana is a secondary character in Kamala Knows Best. So anyway, you guys listen, I'm reading it, and I just, like, last night, I was like, I'm going to stop here so that I will have more to read tomorrow. The best feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that feeling when you're, like, doing something else. You're in your kitchen or whatever, making food, or, you're on the subway going to work, and in your head, you're like
thinking about them.
And for me, the test is whether I think about it as a book or, like, people I know.
People. Like seriously.
I'm like hearing that story, and then it's like, oh, it's a book.
That was a book. Yeah, completely. You know what else I was thinking about? And there's part of the reason I was thinking about this is one of the things I also really appreciate in a book is, I mean, look, when someone, like, surprises me, right? Like, when I'm like, I think I know the way this is going to go, and then I'm literally surprised. Like, that's a book I wish I could go back and read again, too, because I want to see that, right?
That's where I was going.
Okay.
With them, largely. I mean, not entirely, but
yeah.
For me, it's that moment. It's the moment where you sort of gasp. And I did an event earlier this week with Adriana Herrera and Essie Soga, who is an editor at Berkeley. And it was moderated by Erin Leaf, our friend from Learning the Tropes. And Erin's first question was, the panel was about heroines, right? And one of Erin's first question was, like, can you talk to us about, like, who are the primordial romance heroines and why is it Jessica Trent? That was her first question.
Yes.
And what's fascinating is she, when she asked the question, who are the primordial romance heroines? And instantly I was like, Jessica Trent.
Jessica Trent.
And then she said, and why is it Jessica Trent? And all three of us were like, oh yeah, it's Jessica Trent. And we got to, we talked about Lord of Scoundrels on this panel at, like, in 2023, which is rare, but we did.
But fun.
And Lord of Scoundrels is a perfect example of a book that I wish I could read again for the first time, because I can remember where I was.
Yeah.
At the midpoint of that book when, spoiler alert, everyone, Jessica pulls the trigger.
Oh, God.
And she goes home.
There's
she
nothing
puts Mantilla
like it.
on. She puts on her dress and she goes and and she's just had enough with this man. And I some people remember where they were when Kennedy was shot.
I remember where I was when Jessica Trent pulled the trigger, yeah.
I remember, I'm not kidding when I say I can see the apartment around me. I was in I know exactly which apartment I was in. I was lying on my couch and I sat straight up on the couch and I thought,
yeah,
she couldn't have possibly just done that.
Yeah.
And this moment of like, I've never seen it done. I've never felt so great about like a choice in the sense of like, I didn't expect it. I've never seen it done. And then it happens and it's so completely perfect in terms of the choice that I wish I could go back and read that book again, not knowing.
Yeah. Well, listen, I understand
and like,
that
books with twists are like that. And romance especially.
Yes.
It is really hard to find romance that like really does a twist.
Yeah.
Because that's not the job, really.
Right, exactly. So to have it happen, especially so brilliantly, again, listen, Twitter's terrible and everyone should delete their Twitter. I understand that. But I really wish that Adriana had taken screenshots. Maybe they exist somewhere when she was reading
my God.
Lord of Scoundrels for the first time. And it was like the part where she was like, Jessica has date in her hand. She whispers, I own you now. Right? Like, and that was like the joy of watching her read it for the first time.
Stunning.
Oh, yeah.
Stunning.
God.
Whenever anybody goes to Lord of Scoundrels for the first time, I'm just like, oh my God, please text me. Text me every second.
Just text me. Yeah, exactly.
Because and you know what it is? Because it's a drug too.
Yes.
Right? And that's what we are always chasing as romance readers, is like this idea that like, oh, get that feeling once more. And I mean, and
God.
So on my list, there are a number of like really classic romances. And I think part of the reason why there are so many classic romances is because they deliver that sort of, I've never seen it done before.
Right.
Because nobody had ever seen it done before. Right?
Yeah.
But I wrote a big twist and I hear often like, I wish I could do that book again.
The thing that was amazing about the big twist in that book is that my immediate urge was to go back 3 books and start again and see.
It's in my Casino series.
Yeah. Like, did I miss something or did it?
And you did not. I mean, you did. Once you go back and reread it, then you're like, oh, obviously.
Right.
But, I mean, and that's the thing is like, you can only, as a writer, you can only deliver that to a reader one time.
Yeah.
And then the other book that I have on my list that that gave me that exact feeling was Diana Quincy's The Duke Who Ravished Me, which has like a really delightful, like twisty turning plot, and I just didn't see it coming. And that is a governess Duke story. Like he's like a reprobate Duke who, I've talked about this book on the podcast before. He basically lives in like this big old country house that he has turned into essentially like a sex, like an orgy house where like his friends just come and like, sex workers come and they just have like great long like bacchanals on the weekends. And one morning he's literally in his like sex room. And the doorbell rings. I mean, there's no doorbell, but like somebody turns up, and his butler arrives and is like, "Sir, there are 8-year-old twins on the doorstep with their governess," and it's a delight. It's one of the few books where there are children in the books, and they're welcome additions to the book.
Yeah,
and the governess and the Duke. He has inherited these 2 wards, and they're very, very, staunch. Stiff governess. So somebody actually on Instagram messaged us this week and said, is there grumpy sunshine where they are reversed? Which, I know this reverse thing is tricky, but we all know what that means in the sense that it is rare to find a heroine who is grumpy and a hero who is sunshine. Right. And I think this book, The Duke Who Ravished Me, might be close to that.
Okay.
He's not really sunshine. He's more just like a ne'er-do-well. It's like grumpy scoundrel.
There you go. That sounds nice, actually. This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Dani Collins, author of The Prospector's Only Prospect.
Oh my gosh. Jen, you know what is a big bummer? When you mail order a bride.
Yes. Keep going.
And she turns up and she is not the rough and tumble woman that you need to work your gold prospecting land, take care of your kids, and run from bears.
What a struggle.
Anyway, Marigold Davis, our heroine, she regrets her decision almost immediately. Listen, mistakes are made very quickly for poor Marigold. She's a divorcee and she needs a new husband, and she decides she's going to answer an ad for a mail order bride. She does not realize after 8 days in a stagecoach that she is going to turn up in Colorado, the Colorado territories, with all of the bits and pieces, the Deadwood style life,
whatever that is
awaiting her out there.
There's probably not a bath for miles.
No. Oh, but I bet you Virgil Gardner gets her a bathtub.
Of course, he
figures
better.
out a way for her to wash her gorgeous locks.
He has a reputation as a grumpy hard ass, though, Sarah. So what's going to happen with these two?
Yeah, but because that's the best kind, he's definitely going to figure out how to get this lady a bath.
Of course.
Anyway, he is very upset because she is not as advertised. She is way too pretty and way too gentle.
Way too soft for these Colorado territories.
Like, this is just another person he's going to have to take care of when she gets chased by a bear or like falls in a pit, whatever the things are that happen to you. Listen, I'm for it. This feels super like the American mail order bride romances of old. And Publishers Weekly gave this a star review. They say that she balances sensuality and danger in the perfect romance. And I'm for it. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, so you can find The Prospector's Only Prospect, which Dani herself describes as grumpy hero with a trying to be a sunshine heroine, but gosh, her life has been awful lately. This sounds like a book for all of us. It is available in print, ebook, and audio wherever you shop for books. Thanks to Dani for sponsoring this week's episode of Fated Mates. The other thing I've been thinking about is like the books where I just really love the characters so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, obviously the thing that's hard about an episode like this is like, we're going to be talking about books we've talked about before, because I think that this is...
These are the books you love the most.
Yeah, right. Well, and it turns into also like these are books, the way this like manifests itself for me. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this. Like, I mean, we must have. Do you reread? Are you a rereader?
Some. No, I don't reread as much as you do. I have like 6 books that I reread.
Okay. I'm like a scene rereader, right? Where I will like reread like the like part of that. And when I think about the books that I have like reread, or like the books I've reread in totality, it doesn't really happen as often. One of the few is, and I think it's because it depends like where you listen. I don't know if this says about me. I think I do know what it says about me. I often start my rereads at the point of like highest angst. And usually that's like later in the book, right? So I think that's why I don't reread them. Like I just need the pure shot of serotonin when like Scotty thinks that, you know, Sophie's gonna take off and manage. Sure. What's our favorite Naima Simone
scoring off the field? That's on my list too.
The moment of highest angst is at the beginning when she says, "I'm leaving,
I'm quitting," and she just tears his world apart.
So that's like one of the few books I reread in its entirety, because I'm starting from like you're starting at the fucking top of a mountain, right? And then it's just all downhill. And I think about that book a lot. Like that's a book where it's like you mention it to me and I'm like Pavlov's romance reader. I have to go reread it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was on my list too, Naima. To the same extent. So I was thinking there are the favorites, right? The favorite authors, right? And so obviously I just want to say I wish I could read the entirety of Immortals After Dark again for the first time.
Oh, God.
I mean, like reading it the third or fourth time with you for the first season of this podcast gave me such immense joy.
Yeah.
And like just thinking about how much that series has given me joy over the years. Like I reread Rune
right
5 or 6 times a year. Right. And it's a Sweet Ruin is my favorite of the series. And I just adore it. And then I always immediately read Wicked Abyss after. I'm like one of the few Cressley fans who's like, the last two are
are your favorites.
They're the ones for me. A lot of people are like, oh, the Morior. I'm like, no, bring me more of these. Like,
You're like, no, it's Rune and Cian.
I mean, but I know a lot of people feel that way about Lothair. Like, there's just something about there's a chemical in those books that is a delight. And I wish. I mean, what's amazing about those is even on the reread they deliver.
Yeah.
So
well, and that's like the joy of finding a series. Like I remember the first time I was reading it, I had somehow gotten a couple of them like off of maybe like Book Outlet, right? And they were sort of just like waiting for me, and I was like pacing myself to not like tear through them all. And like that's the best feeling, right? I mean, I think this is sort of the corollary of, in some ways, like the books you have in the vault, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I just remember being like, oh man.
Yeah. So obviously Cressley's on that list. But for me, I was thinking about Lisa Kleypas, and we obviously love Derek Craven and like talk about Derek Craven all the time. But for me, the Kleypas book that I wish I could read again for the first time is Devil in Winter. And the reason why I feel that way is because I feel like it was the first time I had ever seen, Rake Wallflower is a trope for a reason, right?
Sure.
Like we've talked about it. Anybody who's written historicals has written Rake Wallflower. Like this is like, it's not an uncommon trope at all. But for me, Devil in Winter turns that trope up to 25.
Oh,
right?
God, yes.
And I think what you were saying earlier about character work, right? There's just something perfect about these two. And I can remember, usually I do not sort of lay in my bed and think to myself, like, why don't these men exist? Right? Like, that is not a problem that I have as a romance reader.
Right.
But man, that's another book where I can see where I was when I was reading it. I can feel the feeling that I had as I was reading that book that, like, if only St. Vincent were real.
Yeah.
And it's like, he is a tremendous character.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the book for Kleypas with me, that I wish I could read again. And it's also possible, look, the other piece of it is I can remember immediately finishing Devil in Winter and then buying, like, getting on Amazon. This was probably one of the first Amazon orders I ever made.
Yeah.
Getting on Amazon and ordering like 12 Kleypas books. So it is also possible it was my first.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't know that for sure.
I don't know what my first Kleypas book was. You know what's interesting about that is I'm not sure which Kleypas book I would want to read again. It might be Dreaming of You for me. Just because it's like so primordial. But you know what's interesting for me is we were talking about Cressley. Is it The Master? Is that my favorite one? I don't know why I can't keep those titles
that's
straight.
Your favorite.
Oh my
God. That whole series too. Not the first one, but the other two.
Yeah. In that book, I did something I very rarely do, which is I read to the end of it and got to the end and literally went
immediately
back to the beginning and started it again. I read that in a loop for like 10 days in a row.
I'm not a rereader, but I do that. And that I've always chalked up to me being a writer too. Is like I get to the end, immediately go back to the beginning, and then I'm like, now I need to figure out how I was made to feel that way.
Yes.
That is a thing I do with Lorraine Heath all the time.
Yeah.
Because nobody does feelings. I mean, like you want to talk about like dropping you. Gorilla Twins is another one that I feel that way about. I wish I could, that moment, the moment of the reveal.
You know, I still haven't read it.
Oh my God.
You know that?
Well, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but the
No, it's
moment of
fine.
the reveal is really
Oh,
great.
I can only imagine.
Recently, because all of these are obviously like, we've just listed
Right.
like a bunch of old books, which says a lot, I think, about, how readers think about the books they wish they could read again for the first time, right? The ones that live in your
Well,
mind.
that's the thing, too. You don't know right away. I mean, like
No.
the first time I read Marrying Winterborn, I was like, it's fine. I would not have predicted, right? So that's the other thing that's really interesting about romance is you can love a book, you can read it once and love it. But like the books that stick with you, it takes a while for them to reveal themselves to you.
Yeah, because they linger.
Right.
But I want to just say last year, and I put this on the best of the year list too, but I think a lot about Angelina Lopez's After Hours on Milagro Street. Since then, I've thought a lot about it's a book that it's another one where I can remember where I was at a certain moment in the book. I mean, obviously I read it 3 months ago. I should be able to remember things, but that's not a thing.
Right.
You don't that's not how it works. I think it is doing a ton of cool stuff, that book. And it also is deeply romantic.
Yeah.
And again, what it's nailing is the feelings, the character work on the heroine is remarkable. And just the moment, and it's so sexy. And I think those three things together, it fired on all cylinders for me.
Yeah. Okay, here's another situation under which I feel like I have that feeling of I wish I could go back and read it again. So one of the things, now look, I'm always, I don't know how to say this because it's not like a slam on anybody, right? I really like people who are interested in ideas. Right? I like reading authors who are really digging into ideas in interesting ways. And so one of the things that I always think about a lot is Christina Lauren's series that starts with Beautiful Bastard, and the next one is Beautiful Stranger. And I read Beautiful Bastard and really loved it. He's a real jerk, and I didn't care. I loved it, right? But when I started Beautiful Stranger, and it's so different, right? So and I think that was one of the things I think about a lot is we get into a rhythm, right, with an author or a series, especially, right, where we're like, okay, I know what to expect. I know what's going to go on. I know who these, I know what this author duo was going to deliver to me. And then for whatever reason, I was like, oh, I didn't expect this at all. Right? Essentially Max and Sarah meet in a nightclub and have sex that night, a one-night stand, and then they have this dramatic all over town, they're banging kind of thing. And it's so different than what you get in book one, where there had instead been this long-term kind of they knew each other forever feeling, and then finally it just explodes. And I really found myself thinking I often wish, I don't know if that makes sense. Right. So when someone surprises me, when a book in a series is very different from another book, or the characters, who they are is different, that's one where I'm kind of oh, I went in thinking XYZ and it took me a while to figure out that it was ABC instead. And that often is a feeling where I'm kind of I wish I would have gone back and started it in the mindset of this book's going to surprise me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's to this day why Beautiful Stranger is probably my favorite of that series. I mean, I love Max and Sarah, obviously. I just thought it was hot.
But element of surprise.
Yeah. I was oh, this isn't what I expected at all. Yeah.
And I think that that's what we kind of keep coming back around to, is each of these books does something that, Sophie Jordan always says oh, the trick with romance, right, is you have to write exactly the same and completely different.
Yes.
All the time.
No
right?
easy task, right?
And it's because, and I think that there's a lot to unpack about just that one statement, right? Because I think so many people stop at exactly the same and they go, oh, well, the genre's not worth it, right? Because it's just the same every time.
Right.
But it's the completely different that keeps us coming back, right? And every once in a while you read a book and it does exactly the same, completely different.
Yeah.
And it just hits it. I think about two other books that are on my list. Kate Claiborne's Luck of the Draw.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kate Claiborne's Luck of the Draw, which is
A perfect
possibly
romance.
the best fake relationship romance ever.
Yeah.
And again, but like the motivation work there, the understanding of that heroine who could have been so unlikable. Like,
Yeah.
there is so much depth work in that book.
Okay.
And I don't just say that because Kate is my friend. And Sarah Mayberry's Her Best Worst Mistake, which I think is like a textbook enemies to lovers book.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
And so, I think when we see it done perfectly as romance readers, we're like, oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
I see how this can be. And then suddenly that's the high we're chasing.
Right.
Choose romance over fentanyl, everyone.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I had another book in my head and I can't remember what it is, but I'll come back to it. I'm sure hopefully it'll pop up into my brain. But okay. So here's the other situation under which I think I really wish I could read a book for a first time. It's not going to really make a lot of sense, but I'm going to tell you anyway. There are books that I think I'm not going to like for whatever reason. Right. And usually it's not like I think I won't like it. Usually it's like the trope. Right. Like, I'm not really a big Secret Baby person or whatever. And then I'm like, oh shit, I love this book. And so for me, I will admit, I think I've talked about this. I was not a huge fan of like the BDSM era of romance. Like I was, it's just, I was like, it wasn't for me.
Sure.
And then you kept telling me to read Alexis Hall's.
For real.
For real. And I kept putting it off because I was kind of like, I'm probably not going to like it because of the BDSM. And then I was like, oh no, fucking this book's brilliant. It's perfect.
Yeah,
right?
it's great.
And so it was like one of those things where I feel like in that situation, my mindset when I started reading sometimes is like, okay, well, I should read this for XYZ reason, right? And instead, I'm like, oh no, I'm reading this because this book is awesome and it's so good, right? And so, I mean, and that's a book that I think of often as being one where you for years, I mean, I only read it when didn't we do a deep dive of it, I think? And I was like, okay, I guess I have to read this. And then I loved it. And I think it was like I just like all those like BDSM era books. And I just didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
I couldn't see beyond the trope, right? To like kind of be like, oh no, this book's amazing.
1,000%. And I think also for me, there are a number. I've said, I'm on the record many times over saying, I think erotic romance is doing more work than most other romance.
Yeah.
Right? And or at least there was a renaissance moment of erotic romance, and that was the Alexis Hall. Nikki Sloan was sort of very new on the scene. Sarah Simone was writing was just new. Like there were a number of very like new authors who were doing really fascinating things. And I talked about this on the best theater list last year, but I've been recommending everywhere Heather Guerra's Preferential Treatment because again, like super sexy, fires on all cylinders for me, and also is somehow doing like real work.
Yeah.
That's another one where I was so surprised by the text.
Yeah.
That I would love to read it again for the first time. And go and immediately screenshot all of those things and send them to you and Kate again. You guys are reading this bananas book.
Yeah.
A Heart of Blood and Ashes.
When I think about the kinds of books you and I have a propensity to put on our best of list, I think every year that there are a couple books that are in that, like, it surprised me. And it doesn't always have to be because it's like literally different. Taking the finger. It's just because it's different than what I thought. I mean, I talk all the time about how much I love that Jeannie Chin series. I have never been a person to really like small town romance, and that series changed me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so that's the thing too. It's like always something like that. Run, Posey, Run is an example of a romance that really, like, I was like, okay, sure, I'll read this. And then I was like, holy shit, what am I reading? Right?
And also, Mia Sosa's The Worst Best Man, like a rom-com in an age when I was very suspicious of anything that was labeled rom-com that was laugh out loud funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, these kind of, again, all these books just they make you go,
Yeah.
oh, I like feel a thing, which to be fair is harder now. You know, we're all a little bit like COVID zombies. And,
Yeah.
and so I think we are all sort of chasing that.
Yeah. That
And
feeling.
we want to feel that feeling again.
It's because it's the best feeling.
It's so good. It's so good. And you don't get it
Yeah.
in a ton of media.
Right. Right. And I think
You
that
can't
that's
go
like,
and you can't go and get it as much. You know, even
Right.
rom-coms, like there used to be a time when we were younger, right? You know, a rom-com would come out, would go into the theaters, and you would go and you would know you were going to get that like feeling at the end. You were going to feel like
yeah.
happy and like, weepy and delighted that these two people were together. And I mean, I don't think movies are delivering that at the same rate anymore. And so I think it's more and more elusive, that
Right.
romance novel feeling, that
I think-
tightness in your chest.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, a lot of the books that make me feel that way are the ones that, like, from the jump, I think there's no way to make this work. Right? There's no way to make this work. Or it like one, it's really interesting because I was like, Bet Me is a good example of a book. Like at the beginning, she overhears him like making a bet that, you know what, about her, she thinks, and it's right. And you're just like, there's no way. I read a book, you know, after our category romance episode, I continued reading a series by Catherine Garbera called The Image Product. In the first one was the one where she's like helping the guy who he has like a brewery, and it turns out that she was mean to him in college. And, you know, it's kind of like, when is he going to find out? But in the third book of the series, it was called Billionaire Fake Out. And it really did make me anxious as I was reading it because I was really looking forward to it. The heroine has been like with this kind of guy in the background for the past 2 books, right? Like, so in book 3, of course, I can't. Her name is Paisley, right? And so Paisley's been with Jack for like these couple of books. And at the beginning of book 3, she finds out that Jack is actually a movie star who has been in Chicago in like making a movie and has basically been like in character with her and hasn't told her the truth. And I was like, oh shit, right?
Straight to jail, Jack.
Exactly. Straight to jail. And she finds out that she's pregnant and she doesn't know how to tell him.
Oh my God.
It makes it worse because her father was like an infamous con man. So she's like and I was like, this is the shit, right? And I'll tell you what, though, like,
that's delicious.
it was. And I was, but at the same time, like, kind of, it goes in an unexpected way because she cannot bring herself to tell him about the baby. And so then there's this whole thing where she's like, am I now doing the thing to him that he did to me about keeping this secret? And of course I was like, no, listen, you know what I mean? But the whole thing about how you trust people. So anyway, I was reading this book and I was literally like, wow, I just like that feeling. Any book that makes me feel that way, that's the book I want to read again for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, there's so many good ones. You know what? Another more recent one that I loved was, and I would love to read it again. And I mean, is Wild Rain
By Beverly Jenkins.
Beverly Jenkins is Wild Rain, where, you know, the heroine, she's so perfect too. You know, the hero's a kind of city boy stuck in the snow, and she has to save him. And on, you know, I think it's set in Montana or Wyoming, like it's set out west. And she's so competent, and he's just so gone for her.
Yeah.
And there is such a real sense of, I mean, Bev does the job better than most people. and so, you know, there are just magnificent moments. I think that's the thing. I think for me, and I said this when I was talking about Lisa and Lorraine, but for me, there are maybe 10 authors in romance
Yeah.
who I have read a book by them and then immediately read everything else that they've written.
Yes. Yeah.
And they have become an auto-buy for me forever.
Yeah.
And it is often because there was one.
Right. Right.
And
yeah.
that's not to say that the others aren't terrific. It's just to say, like, you're always chasing that one.
Yeah. Oh,
and for a
God.
lot of those authors, it is the first one. It's whatever the first one was. You're just wedded to that, like, voice that you just vibe. So I think about, there is a book, and there is, that book for Bev, there is that book for Lisa, that book for Lorraine, that book for Cressley,
Yeah. The fun thing about reading a long series is like I was thinking about, we did, and I know it's confusing to our listeners sometimes, but like when we finally talked about doing a book from the Side Changeling series, like we did my favorite, which I think was like book 4. Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of the other things is like once you get into that world, then you're thinking like, okay, which one of these is my favorite? And I mean, Nalini Singh, like, so a book, I don't know that we've ever talked about it necessarily, but she has a series of books about, I don't know, these like rugby players or whatever. And of course, now I'm going to forget the title of this book. Why are books so hard to find? Why is it so hard to find the titles of books, everybody? But there's one where he's like the new boss. And this is like a hard book to read because she had been like attacked in her home. And so she like thinks of herself as being like a mouse. I think it's called Rock Hard. And yeah, this is it. And so his name's Gabriel Bishop. Her name's Charlotte. And he's like comes in and is basically like firing everybody left, right. And he's like, his job is going to be get this company together in order. And he notices that she's the one who really knows everything that's going on. And but you're kind of like, how could someone who has been so like harmed by the world, literally is so traumatized by what she went through, stand up to this man who is just like a bull, like, right? And yet they are perfect for each other. But it was definitely one of those books where I started reading it and was like, how are you going to make this happen? And I remember I was listening to this book. We were on like a road trip or something. And I was just like listening to it in my AirPods. And when I got to wherever we were going, I had to download the book to read it in because I couldn't stand to wait. I was like, I have to know what's going to happen. I'm going to sit at this fucking volleyball tournament in St. Louis and read this book on my phone. Because I got to know what's going to happen. And that, I think, is the other thing is, just how's it going to happen?
How's it going to happen? And then what's really remarkable, and I know that you and I both have like a slow burn. It's hard, right? It's a hard sell for us, the slow burn.
Yeah.
And I just recently, whatever, on Instagram was talking about Rachel Higginson's The Opposite of You, which we talked about in our chef romance episode. Did we do chef romances? I don't know. I talked about chef romances. You talked about, I don't know what you were doing. You were not talking about chef romances.
You were like, in this book, there is a restaurant. They go out to dinner.
Right. And I was reminded that this book really, this is a book I have reread many times, and like, there's a lot of food in this book. So if that is not of interest to you, you need to just walk away from this one. But, it is such a slow burn, and their romance is so deftly threaded through the food.
Yeah.
That it is an example of a book where like the work of the writing of the fossils, right, was so complex so that when it came to the end and it was so obvious that they were gone for each other, it was another moment where if you went back, it was all there. The breadcrumbs were all there.
Yeah.
But you didn't see them in the moment. And it is, it's a really, really beautiful book. It's long. It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
And so if those things turn you off, it's not for you, but that's another one that.
Listen, it was a great book, and you can make that go a little faster if like me, you're willing to skim over a lot of descriptions of shopping for produce and such. Sorry.
Listen, here's the sell on that book. I mean, like, I just probably gave it the absolute wrong book talk, because the actual sell of that book is that she has a food truck and is parked in the parking lot on the other side of the street from his Michelin star restaurant. And every day he comes to the food truck, gets lunch from her, and then sends her
and then like critiques
on
it.
her food and is like, "Why is salt your enemy?" And everyone, you and her, both want to punch him in the face.
Yeah, but in that way that like later you're going to fall in love with
and then she bans him from her food truck, and she's like, "I will never serve you a meal again." And he like starts sending out guys in to get
It is
food,
amazing.
He's
it really is
with her. Like, it's so great. And that's the other thing. Like, I love it when a writer really has like a creative idea like that, where it's like
ideas.
I mean, sometimes people just have an idea and you're like, that is the greatest idea. And then these books they've had the idea and then they've executed on the idea.
Yes.
And the two have matched up. And that's great.
Romance is unmatched, Sarah.
It is unmatched. Y'all, I told Jen the plot of a book that I had heard about earlier before we started recording, and then we just did like 5 minutes of why is romance so great. And then we decided, here's the thing. If people are like, that plot sounds silly, they're silly, and they're not fun, and you shouldn't invite them to parties.
Fated Mates Live, everybody. Just get ready.
We're going to talk about... It's never serious.
Oh, God, no. I'm so excited about Fated Mates Live. I'm literally like vibrating with energy, and it's still a month away. All right, everybody. I know that was like a random banter-filled episode with books we just wanted to talk about, I guess. That's what happens when Sarah's on deadline, but it doesn't matter, because next week we will be back, I swear to God, with a very serious, very well-organized, maybe, whatever, we're going to do our best, interstitial.
We've like spent a little time thinking about it. But hey, as Jen likes to say, this podcast is free.
This podcast is free. That's true.
But listen, this is a great group of books. You can't go wrong with any of the ones that we've listed.
Yeah, and tell us about your books that you wish you could read again for the first time. Like, it's the best feeling. And then maybe someone will read it for the first time, and you can have the secondhand joy of watching them do it.
If you read any of these books for the first time, please take good notes.
Yes.
And then Instagram or tweet us if you can still get on Twitter. I don't know.
Who the hell knows
I don't know what's
going
happening
on there.
over there. I'm not over there anymore.
It's like a sinking ship, and I'm a rat still on the boat, but I'm considering it's bad. I'm sad about it.
Read Heather Garrett's Preferential Treatment, everyone, and learn about billionaires.
All right, everybody. Well, and there we go. Have a great one. We want to hear about the books you wish you could read for the first time. Tell us about it. Maybe we can read them for the first time.
Oh, and I want to read something for the first time.
Oh, it's the best. Jana Goes Wild.
I'm going to download it right now. I'm going to download it in 2 days.
Yes, you're not going to download it.
All right, everyone. Send good thoughts to me.
Tommy Go Boom.
Just out here blowing things up.
All right.
Thanks to Dani Collins, author of The Prospector's Only Prospect, which releases March 28th, and to Carly Lane, author of A Regency Guide to Modern Life, available right now wherever you get your books. On March 24th, we will be in Brooklyn, New York at Fated Mates Live with Adriana Herrera, Andy Christopher, Joanna Shoup, Mila Finelli, and Tessa Bailey. You won't want to miss it. It is going to be so much fun. It is the perfect opportunity for you to come and hang out with other romance lovers. Bring your friends, make a weekend of it. We can't wait to see you. You'll find ticket information and information about all the authors at fatedmates.net/live. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.